Hi everyone and welcome. I am joined today by Jurij Kofner, an economist and an economic policy advisor of the political party AfD in Germany, to discuss some of these huge social and economic upheavals which we're seeing in Germany, which is also resulting in the transformation of German politics itself. So, yeah, to discuss this, we have here Jurij Kofner. So it's good to see you.
Thank you, Glenn, for having me.
Um, there's been some big news in Germany lately about these political changes. First, only a few days ago, we learned that Alternative for Germany, or AfD, they polled number one in Germany, making it the largest political party. And then now, a few hours ago, it has been reported that the German authorities or intelligence services decided to label the largest political party as a right-wing extremist organization. This is again the main opposition, and for many, they would interpret this as a first step towards actually banning the political party. Indeed, we see politicians as well as media having spoken quite openly about this, the need, as they say, to ban the main opposition party. How can how can we understand this, or how can you explain what's happening in Germany at the moment?
It's quite easy to explain because it's an obvious step by the ruling elite to use any means possible, as you say in English, lawfare, basically, to get rid of the only political opposition, only true opposition in Germany against the current status quo. And they are labeling the AfD as allegedly extremist, right-wing extremist. It's quite funny actually because you can tune your clock to it. Every time when the AfD is leading polls, for example, at state levels, then the state level interior security service labels the AfD as extremist in the state. Now, what is new? We have been labeled as right-wing extremist at the federal level. And so, as you said already, yeah, we are now in the polls the strongest party, exceeding the CDU-CSU party, the formerly conservative party. So the step is quite obvious. But everyone should need to know, especially abroad, that the German Security Internal or Information Service, the so-called Bundesverfassungsschutz, so its task is to safeguard the constitution, is that, well, it doesn't do that. It doesn't safeguard the constitution. It safeguards the government because it is one of the few states, Germany, where this service is directly controlled by the government, and also the head of the service is elected by the government groups in the Bundestag, in the parliament, and also the head of the service is directly reporting to the Ministry of Interior, headed by Nancy Faeser. She is from the SPD, Social Democratic Party. She is quite outspoken left-leaning extremist because basically she wrote articles for Antifa newspapers, which are labeled a terrorist organization in the United States, for example. And so there is um, no independence of this service in Germany, no political independence. They're politically dependent on the ruling government parties, and their main task is to declare the AfD as extremist. And also, basically, what is also there are so many facts which are interesting about this. Uh, they should base their allegations on a report, on a research report, which should be published. It hasn't been published yet. They have, for example, declared the AfD in Saxony as right-wing extremist. I guess it was a year ago or less than that, and they still didn't publish the report, which should offer the facts why we are allegedly right-wing extremists. They didn't do it at the federal level until yet, and the only thing that we know is that we are the alleged reason is that we are saying that there is a German peoples existing apart from the passport. So basically, you have German people who are German because they have a German passport and they can come from every country of the world. And when if they have a passport, they are Germans, and we say that's true. Okay, so that's the legal definition, but also there is an ethno-cultural definition of what being German means, and which I think I don't need to explain to you, Glenn, or to the people listening to us. That is a very normal thing to say. It doesn't mean that we think that other peoples are less worth because we say there are ethnic Germans. But this is basically what they say about us. The internal service they allege this about us. But also, what you need to know is that if you say that it is wrong to say that there are ethnic Germans, then that is against the constitution. Then you also need to say that a large part of the constitution itself and a large part of German law is also anti-constitutional because, for example, one paragraph on the constitution, I'm not going to quote it, I think it's 116.a of the Grundgesetz, German constitution, says that there is a German ethnic citizenship or stateship or belonging to German peoples apart from having a passport. This is obviously a reminiscence to when Germany was defeated in the Second World War. Many ethnic Germans were living in what is now Poland, the Czech Republic, and so on. So they needed to define the legal status of those peoples, yeah. And so, of course, they were not citizens yet. So they find them as just being Germans. And then there's the Bundesvertriebenengesetz, the German law on those ethnic Germans which had to leave their homelands. And this law, which still exists today, many, for example, ethnic Germans coming from Russia apply for German citizenship according to this law. This law defines as being German as someone who has German ancestors, who has German culture, speaks German language, and has said, yes, I am an ethnic German. So those are just few examples how ludicrous this decision is, and it is obviously only a political decision to get rid of the only real opposition party because that's maybe the one thing I would like to add at least. We are a system opposition because we want so many things so radically different, for example, also in foreign policy.
If this was an isolated incident, one could be more relaxed about it. But we see similar trends across Europe, though. In France, the lawfare, as you said, against Le Pen, again, the main opposition, preventing her from running. In Romania, we saw the main who won the presidential election, then it being overturned by the courts and now being banned from actually running. This is the winner of the election. There was a similar, I guess, suppression going on in Moldova, seemingly with full support from the European Union. It's a very concerning trend, this idea that there's a need now to purge the political opposition somehow. And it's being done in the name of preserving democracy as well, which makes it all quite absurd. But I want to ask you, though, how about the socioeconomic, I guess, shakeup happening in Germany? Because there is, well, I guess it's easier to start with the economics as you are an economic advisor and an economist. What are the main things happening in Germany these days? Again, for people outside Europe, it's worth noting that Germany has been considered the economic engine of the European Union, really driving the continent forward. What is happening to the German economy?
So yeah, this is also all connected. Germany is basically deindustrializing. We are being turned from an industrial state to a nation to an agrarian nation, or at least something in that direction. We have seen such a drastic deindustrialization, which we haven't seen actually during the Second World War. So the bombings of the Second World War have not been didn't have such a detrimental effect than what we have been seeing the past 5 years. And you might think, well, now you're of course exaggerating. But when you look, for example, at how many people just in the last year in industry workers have lost their jobs, 120,000 official statistics, 120,000 Germans have been working in industrial jobs have lost their jobs, which is 10,000 each month. You see, when you open the headlines, you see every day there are major German industrial companies who say they are closing shop, they are moving their production abroad. So this is the major trend which we see. Germany has been in a continuous recession since 2019. So you had the Corona years, and then afterwards, of course, as well. So we are now, if you look, you can look at any data. You can look at the GDP growth, or you can look at re, you can look at industrial production, for example. If we would have continued the trend, which was quite good until 2019, with today, we are flatlining since then, and we are under the trend by 25-30% now, where we should be by now if we would have continued the growth trend of the past decade. So this is what we see in the economy. And the reasons are quite simple. The first reason, of course, is the climate policy. So the goal of every ruling party in Germany, that's why I always say that we are the only real opposition, uh, who they want to decarbonize the German industry, the German economy. Uh, what do? They have introduced very strict and very high carbon prices, carbon taxes in Germany. So you have a carbon price on heating, you have a carbon price on when you want to get gasoline at the gas station. You have a carbon price when you fly. You have a carbon price on your food, basically. You have it on everything. You have it on the industry, of course. You have it on energy production. We have then seen, of course, the so-called energy turnaround, which means the plans to decarbonize the energy production, which means Germany just a few years ago had the most modern, or one of the most modern nuclear power plants in the world, the safest power plants in the world. We just have shut them down. We don't, or not we, the government doesn't want to buy Russian gas, which has been the cheapest for Germany, which has been since the 1970s the basics for our industrial growth, because that is tech economy doesn't matter. Still, energy is one of the most important factors for economic growth, and the cheap Russian gas was one of the main factors for our growth. We don't want this Russian gas anymore. We are now buying more in liquefied natural gas from the United States. So when you import 40% of gas from Russia in 2019, now 45% liquefied natural gas from the United States. Nordstream 2, of course, which has been bombed, destroyed, and the government doesn't do anything about clarifying who it was. It are not allegedly, obviously, they know who it was, but they're not interested in finding out for the public. And we are, of course, exiting also coal power plants. Germany has one of the largest coal resources of brown coal. It's not the best kind of coal, but still we are on par basically with China in that regard, in the amount what we have in our ground. We don't want to use that. And we are now switching to volatile wind and solar energy, and the effects of that you have seen in Spain just recently, with the whole country, Portugal, parts of France in blackout, because the grid cannot afford such a volatility. And then, of course, I think another major factor is the mass immigration, which, if you see, for example, Trump has been criticizing mass immigration for the jokingly slogan of they're taking away our jobs. Yeah, so the Mexicans and so on are taking up cheap jobs. In Germany, we have it even worse, because they're not taking away jobs, they're just moving directly into the social system. And so basically now we have 50% of social services of unemployment allowance goes to foreigners in Germany. 22 billion euros each year, plus again then maybe 10 billion euros on asylum seekers. And this is everything which is a massive burden on our welfare state. And to finance this, the last German people who have been working and paying taxes, they are being taxed and taxed ever more, overtaxed. And of course, we are seeing those people leaving Germany in droves. I think it was since Angela Merkel, former chancellor, took office in 2005, over 1 million Germans, highly educated and the best working age, have net left Germany. So net means they have left, including those which have come back. 1 million have left forever. and so we're having a large skilled workers shortage. So all those things, and maybe less point as well. So skilled labor, we have problems with that. We have problems with energy. We have problems with high taxes and bureaucracy monsters, as I call them. So those kind of like um, the carbon how is it called, the CBAM, carbon border adjustment mechanism, for example, which is a huge problem for exporting and importing, or for example the so-called supply chain law which we have in Germany, which is so all this bureaucracy is killing our economy. Recent research from the IFO Institute, one of the main large research institutes in Germany, have estimated the bureaucracy cost on the economy of 146 billion euros each year, which is about 7% of GDP. So this is massive. So Germany is killing itself. The German government is killing our own economy. We have been seeing a massive deindustrialization, people moving away from Germany, and it's the fault of our own government. We're doing it to ourselves.
Well, as you suggested, the energy is really the lifeblood of industries, and Germany was an industrial powerhouse. A lot of the industries were quite energy intensive as well, as these were, yeah, heavy industries. Now, well, I guess for this reason, the German economy has always been somewhat complementary with the Russian, much like now the Russian and Chinese are complementary. But anyone studying geopolitics always knows that this was always known, and it was a key concern for the United Kingdom that you would avoid yeah, Germany and Russia getting too close because that would form a new power block. Indeed, not just the UK, this became also a key issue for the United States. So you would think this would be, well, I guess, do you see Germany having to restore some economic connectivity with Russia as necessary to get out of this trouble and not just revive Germany, but then revive Europe? Because instead, I'm seeing, the next chancellor now, Merz, on TV arguing that Russia didn't just attack Ukraine, they also attacked Europe. And now Germany has to spend hundreds of billions in armament to build up military force to confront Russia. I mean, this is yeah, how is this gonna end, or how? Yeah, do you see any political now or economic recovery without trying to fix, broken Europe?
Yeah, thank you. You call the whole area from Lisbon to Vladivostok complete Europe. That's true because it's Russia is in a sense also a part of the European culture. Of course, it is Eurasian more than just European, but thank you for saying that. Well, of course, I think that's, as you said it, one of the main aims of the enemies of, or I say, let's say, competitors to German independence or German strength, and also Russian strength. They always have tried to undermine the possibility to not let it happen for an alliance between Germany and Russia, because obviously, until recently, Germany had the best technologies, had the industry, the high tech to a large degree, and Russia had resources, a large space, and now, of course, Russia is also, because of the war in Ukraine, is also speeding up concerning technologies, drone technologies, and so on. Um, of course, one of the main elements is, as I said already, the cheap gas, which was so until the 1970s, the backbone of the German industry was cheap coal, brown coal, as I said, and oil from the Arabic countries. And then until when the oil crisis in the 1970s came, the so-called gas pipeline contracts were signed between Western Germany and the Soviet Union, which was allowed by the United States at that time. And that was since then the backbone of the German industry, cheap Russian gas, basically. And now, until 2022, this has been cut off. And I state clearly that this is the fault not of Russia, as has been alleged, but as from the Western countries, Russia, Germany, German government, because Russia many times tried over to say you can have our gas, but you need to pay in rubles. And then because we have been sanctioned, you have to pay in rubles, and the German government didn't want to do that. So, as I said, the logic behind this is obvious. The United States, Trump, for that Biden, and I think they have many strategic similarities in the goal, foreign policy goals, and their aims is that they want to sell Germany their own fossil fuels. So liquefied natural gas has been one of the main export goods now to Europe and Germany. And Germany doesn't have any resources. We don't have rare earth elements. Russia is the fourth largest producer, not producer, has the fourth largest resources of rare earth elements. It has the fourth largest, together with Kazakhstan, resources of uranium. And so basically, of course, this alliance, or let's say a normalization of trade and economic relations between Germany and Russia would be one of the first steps that a German government would have to do, which is interested really in the benefit of the German peoples. That's why the AfD, which is the only maybe one of the two parties in Germany, the other one being that of Sarah Wagenknecht, is saying this loudly. This is our foreign policy goal. We want to improve relations with Russia, and I have calculated the costs of the sanctions for Germany, because the thing is, you see the Russian economy growing, you see the United States economy growing through armament sales as well, or the sale of liquid natural gas. The German economy is maybe, apart from Ukraine, the only country which has economically lost out massively because of this war. The sanctions are costing each German household, two-person household, about 2,500 euros per year. So which includes fiscal transfers to Ukraine, energy, of course, the energy embargo, but also the cost, for example, for Ukraine refugees, because Ukraine refugees, 1.1 million, have come to Germany. They receive the same social benefits as German citizens, which is also unprecedented for every other European country. So 2,500 euros per household has been the cost of those sanctions. On the other hand, if we would have normalization of relations with Russia, we wouldn't have those costs. And also we would have another, I guess, 600 euros on top of that for each household if you would have a free trade agreement with Russia, Eurasian Economic Union, and other benefits, for example, as increasing trade through the northern maritime route. So yeah, it has been a long explanation from my side, but basically the point is, yes, we need this alliance, we need economic cooperation, and those forces which want to weaken Russia and Germany, they are interested in not making that happen.
Well, yeah, I guess a key part of this, yeah, economic cooperation with and also energy trade has been, as we know, the Nordstream gas pipelines. Now, it's not a secret that the United States wanted to stop these pipelines for years, even putting sanctions on European companies who worked on it. And I guess everyone's familiar with Joe Biden standing next to Olaf Scholz as well, threatening that they would bring an end to Nord Stream if Russia ever invaded Ukraine. And of course, when it happened, everyone said, well, it must be the Russians. They obviously destroyed their own pipeline because it's in the Russian playbook. And, it didn't have to make much sense, but this was indeed at the time used to even escalate the war in Ukraine. And also, it was used as a reason why NATO had to be more assertive in the Baltic Sea. But we've seen since then that the Americans have come forth more or less admitting that, yeah, okay, it wasn't the Russians after all, it was the Ukrainians. And, we tried to stop them, but it was too late. But very important, they said that they knew there wasn't, they knew that the Ukrainians were planning this before the attack actually happened, which means that the United States and NATO must have, they lied when they said that there was Russians behind it. And that lie was used to escalate the war in Ukraine and also militarize the Baltic Sea. So how is this covered in Germany in the media now? Because it's yeah, the was the prime minister of or president of Poland. He was he told the Germans to be quiet when they when I think it was an intelligence chief who wanted to find out yeah, which Ukrainians had been behind this. They said Germans should apologize for having built the pipeline to begin with. How is this covered in Germany? Because this is really a key part in the destruction of the German economy. Because there's no good narratives left for us. I mean, either was the Ukrainians, or, in my opinion, it's more likely that it was the Americans. I think they're just trying to blame the Ukrainians here. But either way, if it's not the Russians, there's not a good storyline anymore to sell to the public. So, how is this covered in the German media? And
Yeah.
are there anyone who actually wants to have it restored now? Is or only the AfD?
Well, yeah. First of all, of course, just think about it. This attack has not been investigated for how long now? 3 years. Uh, it has been a terror attack on our own strategic national infrastructure. So this is similar, comparable to what happened in 9/11 in the United States. Many other countries would have started a war invasion for lesser reasons than that. And our own governments, since it happened, didn't do anything. They're still investigating, allegedly. Of course, as we know from reports, Seymour Hersh and others, is that it was planned ahead. It was, if it was the Ukrainians or the Americans themselves, it doesn't matter, because the Ukrainians, I don't think that they would have done it without at least implicit approval by the CIA or NSA or Pentagon. And also, which is more important, the German government, Annalena Baerbock and Olaf Scholz and Merz as well, they knew about it. And that means that they are traitors, because they have allowed an attack of a foreign nation, doesn't matter if it was Russia or Ukraine or United States or whoever, on our own national infrastructure. It has been, this is a reason for war, actually. And so uh, and we have also politicians of the CDU, CSU, so the rhinos, the alleged conservatives, who have said yes, they are approving of this action. So they are approving an attack by a foreign nation on our own national infrastructure. It's crazy. That just to understand this. Secondly, you mentioned the media. So what you need to understand about the German media is that it's basically, we have two kinds of media. We have the official public media, which I divide into the state and public media, which is either the state. Well, we don't have state media, but we have public media, which is basically state media, because it's controlled by the ruling government, the ruling parties. I don't want to get into the details, but it's basically controlled, financed through the state. And the other one is the large private media, which are also, so both of them, which is interesting if you look at them. I have done an analysis of both of them, the press as well as the online media and TV as well, newscasts. They are, to a large extent, if they are controlled by our own government, or they are controlled by organizations which have a clear transatlantic bias, clear not only bias but interest. For example, ProSieben or Bertelsmann Stiftung, which is one of the largest corporations, media houses in Germany. They have it in their own goals, definitions of their own political goals, that they always will support transatlantic unity. And they are, of course, not pro-Trump. They are pro-Democratic Party, as all of them. All the main heads of the resorts, so those people who decide how to spin interior policy articles or foreign policy articles, of all the major newspapers, they in one way or the other, they are members of transatlantic think tanks, Aspen Institute, George Marshall Fund, Atlantic Bridge, and so on. By the way, not only the media, but also of the largest German corporations and largest political parties, all of them except AfD, they are all young leaders of those organizations. Just to have an understanding, which gives you quite a sense why they're reporting in a certain sense. And of course, what they have done, they have talked about many various aspects of this attack on Nord Stream 2, and from such funny stories such as that the Ukrainians, well, first it was Russia, of course. Then when they couldn't hold this narrative because, Sikorsky, former foreign minister of Poland, said, thank you, United States, for bombing Nord Stream 2. And former CIA agents said it wasn't Russia, it was Ukraine, United States, and so on. Then they couldn't hold this narrative. Then they said, yes, it was Ukraine, but it was three people who did it in a sailing boat. And if you think about it, that's quite impossible. Then you have we had a United States fleet at the time in the area, which makes sense. So they came up with all kind of narratives. But basically, to answer your question, they are not talking about it, which is also a kind of way of dealing with information topics. If you just don't talk about it, it's not being talked about in the media. It was Russia or it was Ukraine, but when Ukraine did fine, they have been attacked. So sure, we didn't never liked Nord Stream 2 anyway. We don't need it because we want to decarbonize our economy. We want only the solar power and wind. When German policymakers or the media talk about energy independence, they always talk about fossil fuels from Russia. They don't talk about American liquefied natural gas. And also they don't talk about where the solar panels or the rare earth elements come from for German solar power or wind turbines, which come from China. Yeah, 95% of them. They don't talk about it as well. And then there is a small part of alternative media, as there is in many countries, which of course cover this topic, but they are not able to break through to the larger part of population. They, of course, they see it differently. They bring such reports. We have a lot of bloggers now. The thing is, of course, the government is trying to fight this kind of, as they call it, disinformation, for fake news and so on, because this kind of new information way to get information through bloggers such as you and alternative media, this is something which they haven't yet been able to control yet.
It's yeah, it's just incredible how quickly things yeah fall apart. But on Nord Stream, though, recently you had the Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent of the United States speaking with Tucker Carlson, and they're casually, Tucker Carlson saying, "Well, really, we were the one who destroyed Nord Stream, right?" And then Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, he goes on saying, "Well, maybe it was some Norwegian fishermen, and they, sarcastically, and they have a good laugh, I mean."
So
We blew it up.
somebody did.
Somebody did.
Somebody did.
Probably Putin.
I know some Norwegian fishermen bumped into
This
it.
is, it's just so very openly recognized. All the evidence is there. They kind of pointing out the obvious. Yes, of course, we destroyed the German gas pipeline, and it's just it's a bit shocking for to watch from outside in how there's no reactions coming from the Germans. It's yeah, it is extraordinary. I just feel like if you ignore this for too long, there must be some anger building up, especially as this is now leading to the deindustrialization, or at least contributing to the deindustrialization of Germany. Um, yeah, in terms of how the Americans are leaning in, though, how do you see the Elon Musk's recent, comments and I guess support for the AfD in Germany? Is it seen? Is this like a conservatives and populists united internationally? How do we explain? How do you see this? The I guess the interest that they're taking in Germany.
Yeah. So the most funny aspect of this for me personally has been that before that moment, we have been labeled by the ruling elites, the established media, legacy media, as they call it, as Putinists, Putin understanders, pro-Russian traitors, and so on. And then Trump is quite pro-AfD. J.D. Vance, his famous Munich speech when he said, "You're all illiberal, anti-democratic forces, and we are against this so-called firewall." In German, Brandmauer, the firewall is this agreement of all the other ruling parties never to cooperate with the AfD, because the majority of the voters in Germany, they want a conservative AfD, CDU, CSU coalition government. And CDU-CSU, which is, of course, the main player in this regard, say we will never cooperate with the AfD. And J.D. Vance said that's this kind of firewall. This is anti-democratic. The people want it, and of course he's right. And then, of course, you have Elon Musk, which he spoke at. He had an interview first in January with Alice Weidel, the co-chairwoman of our party, and then he took part via video call at a large party rally of the AfD. And when he then famously said, he said it again, I guess he said it before in the newspaper, only the AfD can save Germany. And so for me personally, the most funny aspect of this was, of course, how will the established politicians, the established media react to this? So are we now Putinists, Or are we now Americans, pro-Trumpists? Who are we? Yeah, we can't be both at the same time, because they always have called themselves that they are the true American friends and transatlantic political force in Germany, and now their transatlantic ally, which it has always been, or sovereign, as I would say it, is now against them, and they couldn't understand it, and they're supporting their enemies. So we, the AfD. That was for me it's still funny every time, because they don't have any more arguments how to label us, and it's very difficult for them. But so apart from those jokes, the deeper thing is that I think, just to take a step back, basically, I think that Trump and the Republican elite, let's say that the new Republicans, the populists in the United States, there are in some aspects they are our friends and our allies. For example, in the culture war, obviously they are our main allies in fighting wokeism, in fighting mass migration, and bringing forward those arguments. As the still strongest nation in the world, United States, if the president of this nation says that he criticizes mass immigration and Antifa and the woke agenda, and climate policy, then of course we have a strong ally in this. But also, and that's what I said maybe a little bit earlier in our interview, Glenn, is that I think still the United States and Trump, he's still, of course, doing what he always promised to do, is to put America first. And it is wrong from German patriots, German AfD members, to say that now he is our savior. He will save German politics. No, he won't. He will continue to put forward American interests. And he's basically doing, in some ways different, but some ways the same, American transatlantic interests in Germany, economic interests. So if Germany has to buy American liquefied gas instead of Russian gas, perfect for Trump, because obviously he wants to support this kind of part of his economy. If we have to buy American tech platforms, their digital services instead of Chinese services, we will be forced to do that, and that's what we're seeing right now. And so we don't have to be blind about that. The Americans put forward their own interests, or what we see it now with the tariffs, with the tariff policy. Scott Bassett, he and Stephen Miran, the main economic policy advisor of Donald Trump, they have put forward the whole agenda beforehand. They want Germans, but also other U.S. allies, to buy American bonds, century bonds, and this is the main way for them to continue with the massive American government debt. And that's why they have put forward those tariffs, just as there has a bargaining chip that we say, okay, we find an agreement on the currency devaluation, we find an agreement with the tariffs, but we have to buy American century bonds so that we finance their debt. So the difference is what we see now from the Biden administration of other Democrat transatlantic forces or globalist forces in the United States, is that they are putting their national interests forward more openly. Let's say it like that. They're not hiding it behind a veil of values, human rights, and so on. They're saying, yes, we want to protect the interests of the steelworkers in Oklahoma. That is our policy goal. And if Germans have to buy American steel or not sell their own steel to the United States, then that's what we will make it happen. And so we have to be open and understand this regard. So again, there are our friends and our allies in the culture war, but in the political questions of sovereignty, of economic prosperity, Germans need to understand that we have to go our own way, and this way is partially a reform of the European Union. It is partially, or in part, normalization and improvement of trade and economic relations with Russia, with China, of course. But also, of course, we are from the AfD, and we say that, and we understand, of course, the United States is a major market for German exporters. And of course, we want good, normal, and mutually beneficial relations with the United States. The way to get there, that's the problem.
Yeah, you mentioned the need to reform the European Union, and yeah, that takes me nicely to my last question, because yeah, these challenges which are occurring in Germany, they're not, of course, isolated or exclusive to Germany. We see similar problems across Europe now. So I guess, what do you see as the main challenge to the European Union, and in terms of what's happening, but also what kind of reforms can be made to actually change some of this?
Yeah. So I think the most important, the largest deficit of the European Union in its current form is its democracy deficit. So the peoples of the member states, they do not have a direct saying in what is being decided at the level of the heads of the states and of the European Commission. So that's why we have laws such as the supply chain law at the European level, which has been postponed. But as we say in German, postponed doesn't mean it has been abolished or it will not be introduced. It has just been postponed by a year. We have the carbon border adjustment mechanism. We have the sanctions on Russia. We have the Digital Services Act, the Artificial Intelligence Act, and so on. So all those kind of bureaucracy monsters, all those policy agendas, or for example, in Germany, a hot political topic has been the law which forces homeowners to basically rip out their own fossil fuel heating systems, gas, oil, and exchange it with very expensive, ineffective heat pumps, for example. So this law has been now delayed in Germany, but it is coming at the European level because it has been decided. And who has decided that? It has just been the heads of states and the European Commission. As you know, the European Parliament doesn't have any initiative right to bring in their own motions, to bring in their own ideas. They only can approve or not approve, but basically they have never not approved of something which has come from the European Commission. So that is one of the most important problems that we face, and we have to change this. But also, apart from that, or maybe last example, of course, mass immigration, which is German policymakers are arguing we cannot refuse refugees because we have European legislation which enforces us to do that. Well, if you look at Hungary, for example, or Poland, we see that is not really the case. We see that those countries are not doing that and still part of the European Union. But okay, but basically, so this is one of the major problems, that there's a democracy deficit. People cannot participating in decision making of the European Union. But apart from that, for example, we have a strong divide in the European Union, and which is becoming stronger and stronger, of those countries which are the burden bearers, which are financing the European market, the European economy, which is Germany, obviously, but also the Netherlands, Austria, France, and Italy as well, which I always say, look at the data, they are also net financiers of the European budget. But then you have other countries like Poland or Hungary or Croatia, which are net receivers. And so Germany each year pays about 20 billion euros net transfers to the European Union. And that is basically the way that the German government doesn't have any way to change what is coming from the European Union as laws, legislation, and that we have to pay for the system to exist in the first place. Also, if we are, of course, as the AfD, we are against the euro because we say the euro with the Target 2 system, which is basically the currency, the currency clearing system in the European Union, the Eurozone. We say that we are net exporters, but we have the other countries own us over in English, I think it's $1 trillion, $1 trillion euros now, which we do not receive because of the fixed currency exchange rates. All those problems altogether, which makes it extremely difficult for our countries and especially for Germany to grow. So what we are saying, that we need a reform of the European Union, which is obviously being labeled as Dexit, and we use this term, but it doesn't mean that we want to pull up borders, yeah, that we just want to leave like the UK, which if you look at the UK, even the UK didn't leave quite. In fact, it still participates in most aspects of the European project. We need a reform of the European Union, where we say we want to return to what is good in the European project. Of course, the peace project is good. We want a common market, not only for goods, also for services, capital, and even labor, but we don't want the negative aspects. First of all, we don't want policy making to be decided only centrally, top down from the European Commission and the heads of states. That needs to be reformed. Secondly, we say that we don't want to pay those transfers for the cohesion policy. We can finance joint research projects in European Union, or we can finance a joint border patrol. These are things we can talk about, but we don't want to finance, corruption in Croatia, which is basically what is now happening. And we don't want to participate in sanctions if we see those European sanctions harm our own economy, Russian sanctions or sanctions against Syria, for example. And we want to decide ourselves on the main policy areas apart from a common market. And that worked more or less fine in the 1980s. And there's no reason why we say we shouldn't have that again. And that is something we want to achieve in the future.
Well, I think, if they go further on these efforts to marginalize AfD by actually banning it, I think, the political instability would be, much worse. And I think it's, it's just shocking that we're actually going down this path. Anyways, Jurij Kofner, thank you so much for your time. It's been, very, very enlightening. Thank you.
Thank you very much for our talk.